Hello everyone, greetings from New York. I'm actually recording this lecture in a hotel in New York City on 55th Street and 7th Avenue. Anyway, I am very excited to talk about culture and human development in this class because it's a topic that's very close to my own work and it's something that I deeply care about. And I hope you will find this lecture helpful. I'll first give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start the lecture by talking about some of the really anthropological approaches to human development, particularly looking at the major theories and theorists of cultural anthropology. And then we're going to look at why it is more important than ever to understand the role of culture in human development. I think in the beginning of the class, I've talked about the importance of really our new realities related to globalization and immigration. And today, I hope to review some of these topics in more detail with all of you. So anthropology is a study of humanity and societies in general. And there are generally four fields, subfields in anthropology: biological anthropology, social cultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology, and archaeology. And I think in some ways the field of social cultural anthropology gets started because of the tension between biological determinism versus social cultural determinism. In biological determinism, which is in some ways nature over nurture, uh, they believe that genetics and biology determine development, and a lot of the theory has its roots in Darwinian theory. And versus on the opposite side, so cultural determinism, theorists believe that society and culture greatly influence development. And in some ways, this debate about whether biology matters more or whether culture and society matter more, in some ways leads to the beginning of the field of cultural anthropology. Some of the most well-known cultural anthropologists include Durkheim, who was a French sociologist. He was one of the founding fathers of sociology and anthropology. He was mainly concerned with really how societies could maintain coherence in the modern era. And he used a lot of psychological explanations for social problems. He argues that anomie, which means this social chaos, really leads to psychological insatiable desires in human beings in a society, and that in turn would lead to suicide and a host of other social problems. Another well-known sociocultural anthropologist, Malinowski, who was a Polish anthropologist, and he kind of pioneered the ethnographic fieldwork through his research in Papua New Guinea and some other islands. And lastly, Levi-Strauss is a French anthropologist who was well known for his study of the myth across cultures, and he proposed that universal laws must govern mythical thought and producing similar myth in different cultures. For example, in nearly every culture, we have the myth of the stealing of fire. And so he argues that each culture may have its own myth, but maybe in the end, there is a universal law of human thought that kind of govern all of these different myths from different cultural origins. And a very quick overview of some of the different theories of anthropology, particularly in early development. So, the 19th century evolutionarism claims that societies develop according to one universal order of cultural evolution. Materialism proposed that the physical world can impact and set constraints on human behavior. Historical particularism claims that each society has its own unique historical development and must be understood based on its own specific cultural context. Functionalism considers culture as an interrelated whole instead of a collection of isolated traits and parts. Structuralism are based on the really assumes that cultural forms are kind of based on common properties of the human mind. And we talk about Levi-Strauss. So in some ways, he single-handedly established really the school of thought that there is really universal principles of the human mind that govern differences within cultures. And the theories of culture and personality in anthropology try to explain relationships between child-rearing customs and human behaviors in different societies. Next, we'll review some of the major anthropologists in the US, focusing on culture and personality. And the first one is Franz Boas. He is generally considered the founding father of American anthropology, although he himself was German-born and German-trained, and he was accredited for really applying the scientific method to the study of human culture and societies. And then Margaret Mead is probably the most influential, most famous American anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. She really, based on her fieldwork in Papua New Guinea, based on her research in Samoa, Margaret Mead found that quite different from the universal claim that was put forward before that during adolescence, everywhere adolescents, they go through this period of turmoil. Margaret Mead found that adolescents, for the Samoa society, they were relaxed and there was a lot of carefree spirit there. So completely without this feeling of turmoil and anxiety as we see in the US and some other developed countries, and which really offer some strong evidence for the cultural determinism theories. And Ruth Benedict is another influential cultural anthropologist in the US, and she argues that few, if any, human traits are universal. She also talks about really the difference between continuous and age-graded stage in terms of human societies. Some societies has very different specific age-related requirement and rules, while other societies, things are more fluid and continuous. Another well-known cultural anthropologist was Robert Levine, who was a professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and he did a lot of research in Kenya and Mexico and other countries, really looking at parenting. And he found that children learn by observing in most of the circumstances. And she also found maternal education to have huge implications for child welfare as well as societal prosperity. And finally, John and Beatrice Redding is a married couple who had a very long, over 60 years of collaboration in their research. And they've done a lot of work in Nairobi, and they also helped establish a child development research unit at the University of Nairobi and brought Kenyan scholars to Harvard University for training. Some of the topics that cultural anthropologists are very keen in terms of their research include child-rearing practices and kinship patterns. So, for example, where do married couples live with after, who do they live with after getting married? And rites of passage and adolescence. And finally, gender roles are very interesting topics of research for cultural anthropologists. So why is it more important than ever for us to understand the role of culture in human development? In my own work, I really turn to anthropologist James Watson, his definition of culture, and really thinking about the different approach to culture as something that used to be perceived as these, what she called, pre-programmed mental library, really to a knowledge system inherited from our ancestors, and to this new way of thinking of culture, which is a set of ideas, attributes, and expectations that is constantly changing as people react to changing circumstances. And in the world we're living today, I think the changing circumstances that are surrounding us and our work and the population of our work is marked by globalization and large-scale immigration.